Hi, you're welcome to my short course on principle-oriented paradigm. Today we shall be talking on how best we can develop a principle-oriented paradigm toward personal as well as business growth. No doubt about the fact that paradigm has a major role to play in life because no one has ever lived beyond his or her scope of paradigm. And as we all know, paradigm is simply the mirror through which life is seen or life is being perceived. Thus, by default, thoughts as well as actions are reflections of paradigm. There are various types of paradigm, but in the context of this course, we shall be talking about the classifications of paradigm, which has been summarized in such a way that would help the audience as well comprehend the importance of paradigm, most especially in relation to one's outlook about life when seen from the perception of a mirror. First, we have the concave paradigm, which is tailored towards information distortion. And most people who actually live from concave paradigm perspective, they tend to make decisions. Based on immediate benefit without putting into considerations the disadvantage of such decisions at the later times. Even perhaps the immediate disadvantage of such decisions at the immediate time. And we also have convex paradigm, which is also tailored toward illusionary representations of information. People who often live from the perspective of convex paradigm as well, they live or they make decisions or they take actions, most especially in relation to the immediate benefit, or perhaps in order to satisfy some certain gratifications without considering the long-term disadvantage of the decisions which they make. Most instances, perhaps people who often live in order to impress, or perhaps to impress the society in one way or the other, perhaps to impress their peers, often live from convex paradigm perspective. And when it comes to optimal paradigm, this is a paradigm in which people who live from such perspective, they have a realistic expectation, or they have a realistic analysis of information as to the short-term benefit as well as the long-term benefit of such information. They rarely close eyes to any disadvantage, be it short-term disadvantage or long-term disadvantage of whatever decisions they want to embark on. Take for instance someone who, some certain set of guys who went ahead to engage in bank robbery, and on getting to the bank, they got caught up by the police officers. Two things were involved. First, there were stray bullets. Some of them were killed. The other ones were taken to jail. Now, when you take a look at the perspective from which those ones are actually making such decisions, you realize the decisions are based on the immediate benefit to be able to get money, and they close eye to the fact that, first, when they are being caught, they could be shot dead, and secondly, they could spend the rest of their life in jail, thereby depriving themselves, as well as their families, the opportunity to enjoy life together. And aside that, those who live from convex paradigm perspective, as I've earlier on mentioned, such paradigm is tailored towards illusionary outlook about life. There are instances where people could have afford some certain things based on what they have in terms of resources, but because the brand that they want to go for isn't something so prevalent within their contemporaries, and that doesn't mean the brands that are available are not of qualities, but because they want to live to the expectations of their peers, they choose to go for things which they can't really maintain or they can't really sustain over the long run, over the long haul. So invariably, they live based on illusionary outlook about life. So generally, this paradigms doesn't only affect one aspect of one's life, but it tends to cut across nearly every areas of life. And we also have the optimal paradigm, which I as well earlier on discussed briefly on. The optimal paradigm has to do with one being able to analyze decisions as to the immediate benefit as well as the future benefit. And most instances, those who live from the optimal paradigm perspective they often tend to achieve primary success in life. As we proceed, we're going to see the difference between primary success as well as secondary success. Primary success are often sustainable over the long, they are sustainable based on the right principles. And so those who live from optimal paradigm perspective, they have these principles that actually guide them towards attaining their desired goals, or towards attaining, having a realistic expectation or realistic analysis of information. And thus that helps them in making the right decisions in any areas of life. No doubt, when trying to develop the right principles tailored towards principle-oriented, when trying to develop the right principles towards principle-oriented paradigm, first, it is important for one to be able to analyze some basic factors which are referred to as paradigm indicators, because in the real sense, these are things that actually determine one's paradigm. That is, it gives a clear overview as to the paradigm with which one is actually operating from. First, your values, and also we have your missions, your purpose, your principles, your results. Values generally in life has a major role to play when it comes to paradigm. Most instances, people who have values, or who have more like an highlighted or articulated values, they often have principles which the value serves as anchors towards. That is, with the values, you will be able to have an anchor to sustain your paradigm, your principles over the long haul. But in instances where there are no values, principles will by default be subject to randomness. And the same thing applicable to missions, purpose, as well as principles in itself, as well as results. When one examines his or her result across various categories of life, one would be able to as well see which of those classifications of paradigm is actually governing one's life. And when it comes to purpose as well, when one analyzes or her purpose, one would be able to see which of these classifications of paradigm he or she has been operating from. And thus one would be able to see how best to optimize and see how best to change or to make modifications to one's paradigm. That is, by seeing how best to improve by developing the right principles tailored towards optimal paradigm. Another interesting thing about building or developing principle-oriented paradigm is having the right foundations. No doubt about the fact that foundation has a major role to play in life. When it comes to buildings, most buildings survive the test of time because of the foundations in which they were erected on. Thus, it is important as well to develop the right foundations, to build the right foundations towards the right principles. And there are basic foundation keys which are important when it comes to building principle-oriented paradigm. The first one is self-awareness. Self-awareness is based on self-management, which is built on one's ability to understand as well as master one's emotions as well as feelings. And no doubt about the fact that self-awareness has a major role to play in nearly every areas of life, most especially in connection with the principles which we're going to discuss on the long run in the course of this short course. Values as well has a major role to play. Value serves as anchor to principled paradigm, as I've earlier on mentioned in the previous slides. Without values, there is nothing that would serve as anchor to principled paradigm. Thus, one would subject his or her paradigm to randomness. And conscience as well is known to be another interesting factor or interesting key towards building the right foundations, because conscience serves as metrics for determining good and bad. So one should be able to have his or her conscience well trained to be able to distinguish between what is right as well as what is wrong. And based on that conscience, the principles as well will be able to thrive successfully towards sustaining primary success over a long period of time. We also have endowments. Endowments has to do with one's assets, which are made to grow via the right principles. And there are instances where one could be naturally endowed, but if one doesn't have the right principle, one would realize one would subject such endowment or such natural asset to such asset will get devalued, because one wouldn't be able to sustain such assets, most especially in attaining primary sources, over a long period of time. Because without the right principle, such one will be subjected to secondary sources, which can always, which doesn't really stand the test of time. So it is important to see how best one could get a firm grip on these 4 keys, which serves as the foundations for principle-oriented paradigm.